Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us both in the room and online. My name is Armida van Rij. I'm a senior research fellow and I lead the Euro program here at Chatham House. It's great to see you all. Thanks so much for joining us for a discussion on the shifting geopolitics in the Eastern Mediterranean. This is on the record, and it is part of Chatham House's Turkey initiative, which is led by my colleague Galip Delay, who will be speaking in this session. This discussion is taking place in a context of polarities and contrast. Before the October 7 attacks, there was kind of a mood of de-escalation across the Middle East, and that mood has certainly carried on bilaterally between Turkey and Greece, which is what we'll primarily be focusing on in today's discussion. But at the same time, there is the frozen conflict in Cyprus, the crisis in Gaza, unresolved conflict in Syria, Libya, and other parts of the Middle East. So there's this strong contrast occurring in the Middle East. In that context, we will discuss what the de-escalation between Greece and Turkey means for the Eastern Mediterranean and whether this bilateral thaw could also have broader positive impacts, the implications for energy and security cooperation in the region, and broader implications for responses to the Gaza crisis and European action and engagement in the Middle East, in the Eastern Mediterranean. To help us do this, we have a great panel lined up. We've got Konstantinos Filis, who is the director of the ACG Institute for Global Affairs and an associate professor at the American College of Greece. We have Galip Delay in the room, who's a senior consulting fellow with the Middle East and North Africa program here at Chatham House. And then online again, we've got Selim Yanel, who's the president of the Global Relations Forum. Unfortunately, Manal has had to drop off. She is unwell and is caught with a bug while traveling. So we'll have to do it with quality over quantity. The way this is going to work is that we'll have about 8 to 10 minutes of opening remarks, and then we'll go into a Q&A both online and in the room. If you are online, please put your questions in the Q&A function and we'll pick them up as the discussion proceeds. So without further ado, Galip, I'm going to start with you, if that's all right. Can you take us through the geopolitics of the East Mediterranean and how these are changing?
Sure. Well, thank you very much. I think the Eastern Mediterranean is a textbook case of how the regions are interlinked and integrated. And when we discuss the geopolitics of these regions, we should not look at them as in an isolated manner, right? Rather look at them how they interact with other regions. And the Eastern Mediterranean straddles Europe, Middle East, and North Africa at the same time. And security and geopolitical trends and developments there very much inform the Eastern Mediterranean security. The Eastern Mediterranean crisis of the recent years, which was very much informing this conversation and many other conversations that we used to have, was qualitatively different than the previous or traditional Greco-Turkish disputes on several accounts. One of them is the expansion of this crisis in the form of this crisis including many more countries and issues in its scope, because the previous Eastern Mediterranean crisis when we were discussing was different from the Greco-Turkish tradition, Greco-Turkish disputes, because it included countries like France, Egypt, UAE, Saudi Arabia, Israel in one way or another in this conversation. And we also see this through the embodiment of the Eastern Mediterranean Energy Forum. Effectively, we talk about like the two camps in the Eastern Mediterranean, the Turkey and these other groupings that was present. The second one, the issues that it included was also increasing. That traditionally, when we discuss the Greco-Turkish relationship or disputes, we are talking about like the maritime boundaries dispute in Eastern Mediterranean. We talk about the Greece's territorial waters in Aegean, the unresolved nature of the Cyprus crisis. But the recent form of the Eastern Mediterranean crisis included many more dimensions. We discussed the gas excavation. As a result of it, the transit route to Europe, or how to bring this gas to Europe, and also the Libyan crisis, because one issue that aggravated this crisis was Turkey and Libya signing the maritime boundaries deal, which also triggered the Greece and Egypt doing the same, whereas the Turkey and Libya's maritime deal conflicted with the Greece's view of its own territorial boundaries. The Greek-Egyptian deal also conflicted with Turkey's own perception of its own territorial boundaries. But despite these different issues, or despite the expansion of this crisis, at its core, the Eastern Mediterranean crisis is about the Greece and Turkey's different projection of their sovereignty. So this is essentially, though we talk about Libya, though we talk about gas, energy, etc., but essentially at its core, this crisis is about the two countries' different projection of their sovereignty and then how it operationalized in real terms. Another dimension that was different, I think, the intensity of this crisis, because this crisis, this time we talk about the military posturing, we talk about the coercive diplomacy, grandstanding being involved in this process. And I think on the top of these issues, another thing that was very much different this time was the international context of this crisis. Because previously, when we discussed the Eastern Mediterranean, usually we will be discussing also the role of the Europe and US. But this time, this crisis was unfolding against the backdrop of the increasing footprint of Russia and China in the region as well. Because Russia's Middle East moment is effectively Russia's Mediterranean moment. When we discuss that where Russia is present or active in the region, we talk about Syria, we talk about Libya, we talk about Eastern Mediterranean, with very close ties with Algeria, with Egypt, and so on and so forth. So all of these countries are the Mediterranean countries. So the Russia's Middle East moment is effectively Russia's Mediterranean moment. And given that Libya was also very pertinent for our discussion here, Russia is a major actor in Libya. So therefore, the international context of this crisis was different. Secondly, I think that how China, less discussed but not less important, is the maritime route between China and Europe obviously involved passage through Mediterranean. And particularly after the invasion of Ukraine, the importance of the maritime route has increased because the northern route, that was also another connectivity route previously, there is a 40% drop in cargo shipment between China and Europe through this northern route because as a result of the invasion, because this route passes through Russia and Belarus. And the middle corridor, which also passes through Turkey, is still quite a modest project when you compare to northern route and maritime. So the importance of the maritime has actually increased. So therefore, the importance of Mediterranean for Russia has increased. And recently, we should bear in mind the interconnection between Red Sea and Mediterranean when we discuss how this geopolitical ramification is evolving. But how is this crisis now evolving? As the previous tension in the Middle East has led to the expansion of this crisis, recently the de-escalation in the region is actually between Turkey and Arab Gulf states and Greece, but particularly between Turkey and Arab Gulf states, is actually leading to the shrinking of this crisis. So because we have two contradictory trends in the region, one of them, the de-escalation that was defined in the regional politics, particularly prior to the October 7th, and then the war in Gaza, because both Israel and Palestine are not only Middle Eastern actors, but also they're Eastern Mediterranean actors. So on the one hand is this de-escalation between Turkey and Arab Gulf states is leading to the shrinking of this crisis, both in terms of its content and also in terms of the countries involved in this process. Indeed, decoupling or driving a wedge between Turkey and between Greece and Arab Gulf states was one of the main motivation for Ankara to embark on the recent de-escalation and reset with the Arab Gulf states, because for Ankara, it was extremely concerning that in the latest iteration of the Eastern Mediterranean crisis, that it faced a block of countries that very much sided with Greece in its dispute with Turkey, that included Egypt, Israel, Saudi Arabia, UAE, etc. So the Turkey wanted to drive a wedge between these countries and Greece. Secondly, we see as a result of this de-escalation, we see the reduction of tension in conflict zones. As I mentioned, the Libya was quite pertinent and played quite an aggravating role in the latest Eastern Mediterranean crisis. And right now you have a reduction of tension in Libya that also have a reduction, that also means a reduction of tension, a relative reduction of tension in the Eastern Mediterranean in general. So therefore, this de-escalation mode between Turkey and Arab Gulf states is leading to a process in which we see the shrinking of crisis, both in terms of its content and the countries involved. And on the top of it, the recent positive climate that defines Turkey's Greek relationship. I think we should be careful there because in Turkish-Greek relationship, there is always also a third actor, which is Cyprus. But in its current form of the reduction of tension, this is actually concerned more the Turkish-Greek level rather than Turkish-Greece and Cyprus level. So it is more bilateral than trilateral in its current form and shape, and it's still quite fragile. And so that the other contradictory trends that we see is the war, is the Gaza invasion, the war in Gaza, that is proving to be contrary to the previous idea of regional cooperation in the region, because the Israel was key in the realignment in the Eastern Mediterranean. The Israel was key in the realignment. Both we see the two level of realignments in the Middle East. One of them is the Gulf-centric one, and one of them is Mediterranean-centric one. I think one country that was quite crucial in both of these realignments was Israel, because Israel was part of the Abraham Accord, but it's also one of the major actors in the Eastern Mediterranean Energy Forum. It was part of the discussion about the energy transit from Eastern Mediterranean to Europe. It's part of the I2U2. It's part of the Negev Forum. So almost if you look at any regional initiatives of the recent years, be it the Mediterranean-centric one or the Gulf-centric one, it is the Israel that is at the interconnection of both of them. Previously, when we discussed the question of cooperation in the Mediterranean, the elephant in the room was Turkey, because almost all emergent trend of regional energy and security order in Eastern Mediterranean didn't include Turkey, and that also was one of the reasons that Turkey engaged in a policy of disrupting this as much as possible. Now, I think the regional cooperation in Eastern Mediterranean will have Israel question. The longer that this war goes on, we will have this question to be more discussed, because despite everything, non-cooperation with Israel might emerge as one of the lowest common denominator of Arab consensus on Israel. Irrespective of their wishes at this stage, I think the popular pressure that they might feel might prevent them from engaging in regional cooperative efforts in this region. So one thing that we might see actually non-cooperation with Israel in the coming years, and that will effectively have an impact on Eastern Mediterranean. The second, I think, thing that we are seeing, the U.S. idea of regional order, or the U.S. vision of the regional order, also suffered a major blow. Because at the core of the U.S. idea of the regional order, if you look at all the U.S. initiatives, again, from the Abraham Accord to IMEC, to I2U2, to Negev summits, the U.S. also very much supported the Eastern Mediterranean Forum. At the core of it is the Arab-Israeli cooperation supported by the U.S., excluding, if not containing Iran, excluding or rolling back the Russian and China's role in the region, and I think denying a role for Turkey as well was part of this. Is part of this as well, and as I mentioned, Israel was one of the central actors there, both in terms of the Gulf alliance and Mediterranean alliance. I think the longer that this war continues, the more the U.S. vision of the regional order will face a crisis on this, a crisis, or a legitimate crisis, but a political crisis at the same time. Finally, if I have a few minutes, what needs to be done, or how can Europe, what Europe can do. I think Europe particularly should put a bit more energy and diplomacy on the Greek-Turkish level and the Eastern Mediterranean in general, because the Eastern Mediterranean crisis is not a crisis in European neighborhood. It is a crisis that is very much a crisis of European security and a crisis of European security of European neighborhood at the same time, because it includes the EU member states, not only Greece and Cyprus, but also previously France. It includes three NATO members, Turkey, Greece, and France. So therefore, it is about the European security and neighborhood security at the same time. So this is one of the crises in which we will judge the European political actors. Secondly, in the Western confrontation with Russia, I think we should not, as I have emphasized earlier, we should not regard the Eastern neighborhood and Southern neighborhood, or the Black Sea or Eastern Mediterranean, as two different zones. I think they should be treated as a single space. And therefore, this is also very important in terms of the great power competition between the confrontation between the West and Russia, but also great power competition. Finally, the two issue is really important when we discuss the future of Turkish-Western relationship. One of them is whether Turkey and European actors or the West will be competitive or cooperative in their shared neighborhood, whether their geopolitical interests will conflict or will be more in harmony. And then the second one is how these two actors will approach to the great power competition, but more importantly, to the role of Russia and China in their shared neighborhood. I think I think this is, in this regard, the Eastern Mediterranean crisis is key to prevent fragmentation on two levels. Fragmentation in the European neighborhood, because if the Turkish-European interests are misaligned or more competitive, probably we'll see more fragmentation in European neighborhood, and probably we'll see the footprint of Russia and China in this neighborhood will increase, not decrease. And secondly, that also has impact for the transatlantic alliance. So if we see the tension between the NATO members are not managed well, that means also fragmentation within the transatlantic alliance. So therefore, this is a crisis that should involve, I think, a very significant level of foreign and security policy dialogue at the nexus of Europe, Greece, Turkey, NATO, going forward.
Thanks very much, Khaled. We'll come to the EU-NATO dimension a little bit later on in the discussion, but I just want to pick you up, before turning to Konstantinos, I just want to pick you up on one point that you make, which is that Turkey had been previously excluded from a lot of the regional fora and discussions, and that may now end up happening, and as a result, it was quite disruptive. That may now end up happening to Israel. What are some of the potential risks of Israel being excluded from participating in regional cooperative mechanisms?
Well, I don't expect that the Eastern Mediterranean Energy Forum will kick Israel anytime soon. But I think what I expect, because the Eastern Mediterranean Energy Forum was supposed to give birth to many different cooperation frameworks that would have involved both Arab states and Israel. And I think that is the one that I see being hard to achieve at this stage. And secondly, the fault line of the regional geopolitics for a long time, particularly over the last decade, more focused on Iran's role in the region, or the new conflict zones in the region. With this war, once again, the fault line in the region probably can shift back to Israel's regional role, and therefore that will involve also anything around the cooperation with Israel, or the cooperation at the nexus of Israel, region, and Europe. So this is what I see might be the potential scenarios that we'll be seeing soon.
Great, thank you very much. I think that set us up really well in terms of an overview of what's been happening. Konstantinos, can I now turn to you in terms of, and can you talk a little bit about how the shift that Gallup has talked about is changing Greece's priorities in the region, and what Greece's objectives will be going forward?
Greece's priorities in the Eastern Mediterranean are very specific and are guided by the stabilization of the situation, which presupposes partnerships between regional actors, joint response to the threats shared by the states in the region, manage migration flows, settlement of frozen conflicts like the Cyprus issue or hot conflicts like that between the Palestinians and Israelis, and of course, the substantial and not just formal normalization of relations with Turkey. At the same time, of course, I have to admit that the containment of Turkey's revisionism, as we approach it, is an angle of our policy that we cannot distinct from the overall strategy. At this point, I would like to clarify the following for the sake of restoring historical truth. Greece never wanted to raise an iron curtain against Turkey in the Eastern Mediterranean, as some in Turkey believe. It was the Turkish leadership that ruptured relations, first with Israel and after Morsi's overthrow with Egypt, for more than a decade. A state of affairs that created the conditions for Greece, Israel, Egypt, and the Republic of Cyprus to consolidate a front, not against Turkey, but in favor of synergies, with an emphasis on energy, even if some efforts did not bear fruit, and with emphasis on rules and conduct of good neighborly relations in the midst of present situations, including refugee flows, tensions between major powers, the shift of the terrorist network from East Asia to the Middle East and Africa, the economic crisis that hit the European South particularly hard, and later, of course, the war in Ukraine and the dividing lines it created. So for Greece, Turkey's return to a track of normalcy, which consists not only in the effort to restore relations with Israel and Egypt, though the situation, as has been discussed with the former, has deteriorated due to the situation in Gaza, but also in halting of aggressive policies against its neighbors, and it's maintaining a climate free of tensions, verbal threats and disputing of sovereign rights as we approach it, and even sovereignty is especially welcome. And what's more, we have forged such solid relations with Israel and Egypt during the last decade that rather than having anything to fear, we saw Athens welcome Erdogan's recent visit to Cairo. And according to unconfirmed reports, probably you have read them, Egypt even proposed mediating, which it has long experience in the Israel-Palestine issue, between Greece and Turkey, should the need arise. And since I was asked to speak 3 minutes more, I would like to focus to Turkish-Egyptian approach, if I may, for just 2 minutes, and then continue. Egypt is in a very difficult position right now. As you know, the impact of the grain crisis, the over 60% fall in Suez revenues, the rapid increase in its population, migratory flows reaching 6 to 7 million, and the obvious pressure it is under from the war in Gaza, they have shaken the El-Sisi regime's footing. And the rapprochement with Turkey is being encouraged by Egyptian financiers, including mainly Qatar and other Gulf monarchies. Turkey's investments are not insignificant, especially in the current state of affairs for the Egyptian economy. Similarly, cooperation in the natural gas sector would offer Cairo a way out towards a large and thirsty market like Turkey's. At the same time, Ankara has significant influence on the African continent, especially in Sudan and Ethiopia, and it is important for Cairo to stabilize the situation in its neighborhood, because this affects, among other things, the migration flows that end up in Egypt. In Gaza, the two sides share their concerns about Israel's actions, although Egypt is several steps ahead, being an active participant in the negotiations. And finally, there is a real possibility of defense industries, with Turkey's major advantage being its investment of recent decades in its domestic arms industry and its ability to sell a weapons system. And of course, for Turkey, with an eye on the US, the rapprochement with Egypt serves, among other things, the new narrative about a constructive role and willingness to bridge, if not settle, with neighbors, with the exception of Cyprus, for the sake of regional stability. Going back to Greek-Turkish relations, of course, there is still the major problem of the Cyprus issue, as was mentioned. But it is obvious that Athens and Ankara have decided to invest improving bilateral relations, hoping that this will have a positive impact on the Cyprus issue at some point. Although I must say that I'm not particularly optimistic about this. Instead of the stalemate or the Cyprus issue negatively affecting Greek-Turkish relations. Of course, the ideology, not doctrine yet, in my view, of the blue homeland remains on the table. Turkey continues to refer to the need to demilitarize Greek islands, even linking these to issues of sovereignty, which is really important for us. It reiterates the issue of gray zones from time to time, and it is obvious that the differences between the two countries on these issues are vast. However, if we choose to focus only on what divides us, on how difficult it will be to bridge our differences, we will remain in a state of inertia from which we can only lose without taking initiative, without seeking and focusing on what unites us and the common challenges we are facing. And there are many. After all, if we truly want to normalize our relations, we have to start somewhere. We need a roadmap. So let's say that this start can come from the positive agenda, or the so-called positive agenda of useful and critical partnerships at various levels. We need the positive agenda to consolidate a climate of relative trust, provided that calm is maintained on the ground in the Aegean and the Eastern Mediterranean. And then, if we have shaped the right conditions, we can start a sincere, a substantial dialogue to determine if there is a potential for a bilateral solution. If this fails, which is the most probable scenario, we will move on to the next phase, which is just as demanding, the delimitation of the agenda through which we will ask an international judicial body to resolve our differences, those that concern sovereign rights and certainly not sovereignty. Even if we don't succeed in these final states, it is important for both sides and leaders and societies to see that we can still work together on various levels to the benefit of our economies and societies. Right now, the war in Gaza is raging, and I wish it would stop right this moment, because an unprecedented humanitarian disaster is unfolding there. Of course, there is also the war in Ukraine, which is by no means far from our region, and they're interlinked, the two fronts. These two fronts are having a catalytic effect on regional processes. Not only was the effort to re-establish Turkish-Israeli relations halted, but over time Israel is becoming more isolated, distancing itself from Egypt, other Arab countries, and Western partners. And it seems that the effort that started in 2020 with the Abraham Accords is now being undermined by Israel itself. Of course, Greece supports Israel's right to self-defense following the heinous terrorist attack of October 7, but it is deeply concerned by unacceptable actions that have been carried in the Gaza Strip since then. Competition and divisions between major powers, again, they were mentioned before, outside the region are being exacerbated by developments, and this certainly has an impact on regional developments. In an ideal scenario, and I'm going to close with that, in my mind, the impact could even be positive, so that the states in the region can see that they have to seek solutions with each other, setting the region in order without any patrons who either do not want to be further involved or are showing themselves to be incapable of controlling developments in the right direction, or their voices have been lost the weight they had in the past. But I repeat, even though the settlement of issues on a local level seems a little like a science fiction scenario right now, we shouldn't rule it out. And we can start from something tangible like energy. Capitalizing on energy requires stability and cooperation if it is to benefit all regional actors. Natural gas, as you know, in the short term, and renewables in the long term, for much deeper plans, can be the focus of this potential partnership. And in any event, and I conclude, an inclusive regional conference following the end of the war in Gaza, obviously, would make sense, if it were well prepared and had a specific subject, not just brainstorming that would result in parallel monologues. And here, the European Union could and should contribute in this direction. I think I'm going to stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Konstantinos. That was really useful. I just want to pick you up on the Cyprus question. So you've talked about how there's currently a stalemate, how it's unlikely that that will be resolved, but you've also talked a little bit about the opportunities needed to resolve the issue. I guess my question is, what are some of the risks of trying to resolve the issue and then failing to then effectively address it? And what are some of the risks for some of the other regional cooperative mechanisms that you've talked about in terms of the conference and things like that?
I will be very strict and very direct in my answer. I think that the last chance for a resolution of the Cyprus issue was lost in Crown Montana in 2017. I don't think that the idea of a bizonal, bicommunal solution is anymore on the table, at least as we had it up until recently. And I'm not optimistic at all about Cyprus.
Thanks very much for being so candid. And I guess that still kind of leaves the open question of, great, okay, so what are then the implications that Cyprus cannot be resolved for the continued...
I can get, I can come back to that during the Q&A session.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. And then finally, Selim, could we talk a little bit more about Turkey in a bit more detail? What's Turkey's calculation about the recent escalation? What can we expect from them going forward? Where are their interests?
Well, thank you very much, and greetings from Istanbul. Sorry I'm not being there. And I probably will touch upon a number of issues that have already been discussed. And I'd like to put things into perspective. As is mentioned, the last decade of Turkish foreign policy has been different than the previous years. And that's because of the nature of Turkish foreign policy being more and more personal and ideological. And this stems from the president himself and his entourage. It has started before when, Davutoğlu was the prime minister and foreign minister before that. But it has accumulated and has become standard, unfortunately, when Erdogan became president. And soon afterwards, this led to a lot of hubris and unfortunate policy positions in which that came up with isolation. This has been mentioned, the fact that Turkey had no friends in the neighborhood. And this was called splendid loneliness, a big mistake. But recently, I think it started at the end of 2020, that Turkey had to come out of this isolation because of basically economic reasons. The economy was sliding. It is now in a very detrimental situation, but it has started to slide around those times. So Turkey needed to get out of this isolation. It was not only because it was left out, but also because it was hurting itself. And therefore, it tried to come back. And of course, this took some time. You just cannot come back and build up trust that you've lost during these years. So, if you might remember, Erdogan called Sisi bad names. He talked to Mitsotakis that he wouldn't talk to him again. And then we saw him embrace him, also embrace Sisi. He called Salman a killer, and then he embraced them as well. So all the people that he, let's say, insulted one way or the other, he has now tried to come back. And this took some time. And I think that those countries are making a little bit pay for this, not making it easy for him. Indeed, because some of the promises that some of the Arab countries have made, economic promises, commercial promises, have not materialized yet. So this is a difficult situation for him, but he's making an effort to redress this. Now, of course, we had good relations, or we had started to have good relations with Israel as well up until October 7. In fact, Israel was the one who initiated it. And we had began to have reciprocating policies. Ambassadors were sent to each other, but now it's, of course, a total different ballgame. Cyprus was mentioned, and I couldn't agree more with Konstantinos. It is, I think, impossible to have any success on that island. It's been tried for more than 50 years. Numerous efforts have been made. I understand that the UN is going to try it again. I don't think anything will happen. There'll be meetings here and there. Maybe they'll find another place to get together, but I don't see any positive result coming from that. Not that it would hurt anybody either, because there is no crisis on the island. It's not like what's happening in Ukraine, what's happening in the Middle East. There is no crisis. There is no urgency. Nobody really cares, unfortunately, about that. So how do we come back to mending the situation? The positive thing that we've seen so far is the relationship between Greece and Turkey. I do hope that this will continue. We had such a process after 1999 when Turkey was a candidate, considered to be a candidate in Helsinki. This took on for a number of years, but it then subsided. We do hope that this will be more, let's say, have a longer life, longer shelf life. This is important for the region. And of course, it will help the Eastern Mediterranean. The Eastern Mediterranean is basically a newer issue. Let's say our challenges were mostly concentrated in the Aegean, not in the Eastern Mediterranean. This came up a little bit later because of searching for oil and gas. And now that there is this energy forum, what about that? People are talking about energy as something that could bring the two countries together, or the regional countries together. Now, Turkey is the country that's been left out of this forum, and so it would be appropriate to bring it back in, and that will be a helpful gesture. I think the problem with many countries facing Turkey is that they don't know if this policy will continue, because we've seen that President Erdogan has been erratic. He can change his policies from one day to the next. So is he trustworthy? Will these policies continue or not? Or will they start insulting again? All these things are being considered, I'm sure, in the chancelleries. Let's talk about Russia. The relationship between Turkey and Russia is actually rather ironical, because for centuries we've been adversaries, if not enemies, and of course lately we've become much, much closer. But this closeness is deriving from the personal relationship between the two presidents, nothing else. When you look at the regions, whether it's the Caucasus, the Balkans, Libya, Syria, of course Ukraine, all around, we have different policies, actually opposite policies. And the only way in which we are getting together is because of the relationship between the two presidents. And that is connected to energy, whether it's the gas or now even nuclear energy, because the Russians are building a nuclear plant in Turkey. And that's going to be a cause of concern. Now, the Middle East effect is going to be there, definitely. The US is there, Russia is there, although the US is now trying to remove itself from Syria. Turkey is involved in the Middle East, no matter what. But to make the relationship smoother and, let's say, tension-free, we need more and more dialogue. And the dialogue we don't have is with the EU, unfortunately. Now, the EU is, of course, putting a lot of conditions in front of Turkey. Some of them are totally understandable. It's with regard to human rights, the rule of law. Of course, these are very important issues, but that is preventing any dialogue or meaningful dialogue from going on, from continuing. Even with the customs union. I mean, that's a commercial deal, basically, but political obstacles are in front of it. Turkey and the EU need each other for the future of Europe. Now, we don't know what will happen with Ukraine. Whether Trump, nobody has mentioned about that, but I think that we have to mention that as well, whether Trump will be president or not. Even if he isn't, even if Biden continues or somebody else, we won't see the US involvement getting stronger and stronger in Europe. So, and the Russian threat will be there. So Turkey or the EU or Europe will need each other. We have to become together. The European political community is there, but we don't expect much to happen from that. But we need a dialogue. And the dialogue that now Turkey is trying to do with its neighborhood needs to go beyond that. It needs to go to the European Union, to Brussels as well. And there, Greece could be helpful. Greece is now supporting Turkey. We understand that, and we're very grateful for that. But it needs to go beyond that and try to persuade some of its other members, Germany and France, to have a meaningful dialogue with Turkey on these important issues. The Eastern Mediterranean is nothing much is happening now. There's no crisis, I said, and there could be more and more, let's say, cooperation in that area. But if we're going to go beyond the issues, the major issues right now, we need more and more cooperation, and I see that as lacking. This is an opportunity for the EU and our neighbors to embrace Turkey now that Turkey is in need economically and politically. to have better relations with its neighborhood. I think now the president has understood this. Use this opportunity to bring back Turkey and have let's say, a sustainable relationship with its neighborhood. I think I should stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Salim, and thank you for bringing up the US, Trump 2.0 or not, but likely, as well as the EU. You talked a lot about how Turkish foreign policy is personality-driven and how Erdogan's had a big job in rebuilding trust with some of his key partners, or where the partnerships were fractured, as well as the need for dialogue with the EU. The EU is one of those actors where Erdogan ruptured the relationship in part, and ruptured some of that trust that existed. The situation when von der Leyen went to Ankara and was made to sit separately, those kinds of things, which are very visible, very awkward, very embarrassing. Obviously, we don't know who will be the next European Commission president. But you talked a little bit about rebuilding ties with individual member states. But what about with the EU institution itself? What is needed for that beyond dialogue? And then
well, the rupture between the EU and Turkey started before that, especially after the coup attempt in 2016. That's when the crucial timeline could be considered. That's when it went downhill, because human rights issue, the rule of law issue, suffered mainly after the coup attempt, and even before that, the EU was pushing Turkey away because of what Sarkozy and Merkel were doing. They were not happy with Turkey getting closer to the Union as a member. Let's not talk about that right now. It's irrelevant. But right now we have a Borrell report. He wrote this towards the end of the year, towards how to bring back Turkey or how to mend relations. And he made a few suggestions. But still, even those suggestions had a lot of caveats and conditions. And one of the things that he proposed, a very small detail that we've, I think, always mentioned, is bring Turkey into the the foreign policy dialogue, invite Turkey to the Gimnik meetings. It happens every 6 months, and it is under the purview of Borrell himself. So he's suggesting to himself to do something, and I guess he needs the backing of the member states. So this is a very small step to bring Turkey back to talk about foreign policy issues, and not just talk about them, but cooperate together. Because when I was ambassador in Brussels, we had meetings about foreign policy issues, but we just mentioned what we were doing to each side. We were just talking about what we were doing here and there, but not cooperating at all. And this is what's missing. And I think this is the area in which we should concentrate.
We will now open the floor for discussion, comments, questions. One thing I want to put on the floor, which we can come back to as well, is the question of NATO. And is this question of, so if broadly you all agree, there's been a rebuilding of relations between Greece and Turkey, that's positive. What implications does that have for the functioning of NATO, and also for EU-NATO cooperation, which has traditionally been hampered by particularly the Cyprus issue, and particularly as you've all alluded to, the likelihood of a Trump presidency, not sure about US engagement in both Europe and the Middle East going forward, et cetera, et cetera. So what could this potentially mean for NATO? There's a question in the room. Can you introduce yourself, please?
The comment and the question together. And the Konstantinos said the Cyprus problem now cannot be solved anymore. And I want to actually raise the question again, which problem, particularly the exclusive economic zones, maritime border, and demilitarization of the islands in the Aegean Sea, which problems really can be solved between the Greece and Turkey, and apart from just Cyprus, because all problems, the both sides is the claim 100% of their priority, say, okay, we are the right on the 100%, and the Southern Cyprus Republic and the Northern Cyprus Republic is just one option and cannot be agreed with both sides. And depends on the Treaty of the Lausanne. If before the establishment of the Turkish Republic, there's some issues claimed, such as 3 miles of the maritime zone for the island, and now it's a 6 mile. And the Greece wanted to increase 12 more, but Turkey accepted it as a reason for the war. And there's some conflict emerged in the past, in Cyprus and the Kardak, and it always results in the conflict, and Turkey intervened in the Cyprus. So with these examples of the island problem and exclusive economic zone problems, which problem can be solved between Greece and Turkey? If you go under the court and in this order after the 7th October in the world, the court and the theoretical solutions for this kind of conflict is not important for anymore. That's why I assume the normalization between Greece and Turkey is always frozen of the old conflicts and protect the status quo between the region. In the past, the United States guarantor of this process, this status quo, but for the future, actually, depends on the both sides and asking again which problem can be solved apart from Cyprus.
Thank you. Can you just introduce yourself?
Okay, Abdullah Haran from the University of Essex.
Perfect, thank you very much. And just to add to the Cyprus questions, there's been a couple of questions online about this. I told you, Konstantinos, we'd come back to this. So there's a question around how long can the bilateral rapprochement between Ankara and Athens continue by keeping hot button issues such as Cyprus out of the equation? To Selim, a question on Turkey-EU relations and the extent to which Cyprus will continue to have an impact on that. Then we'll go to you, sir, in the room. Sorry?
It's relevant, if I can.
No, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Spiros Mirtiadis, I'm the Deputy High Commissioner of Cyprus. A couple of comments on what Konstantinos and Selim said about the Cyprus issue. I had it's impossible to solve. There's no urgency. Nobody cares. Well, we care, of course, and I think there's an urgency too, as the region has proven. There's no such thing as a frozen conflict. A frozen conflict can easily turn into a hot conflict. So yeah, there might be quiet in Cyprus, but there's no peace. And peace is not the absence of war, it's the absence of implementation of the rule of law, international law. My question would be how far Greek-Turkey rapprochement can go with absence of resolving the Cyprus issue, and whether the resolving the Cyprus issue could help in cooperation in the Eastern Mediterranean.
Thank you. Is your question on Cyprus? Because if not, we'll come back to you in the next round, if that's all right.
It's on energy.
Okay, let's tackle these questions first and then we'll come back to you. Selim, should we perhaps start with you?
Okay, sure. Thank you very much for these questions. Cyprus, of course, has an impact on Turkish-EU relations. It has had it for years, if not decades. And it has prevented Turkey from moving ahead on our own accession process and many other issues. Before Cyprus joined, it was Greece who had prevented Turkey from making any progress. And now it's basically Cyprus has taken up that baton. So definitely it's in our interest to solve the Cyprus issue. Efforts have been made. And the closest we got was in 2004, the referenda at the time. And since then, I don't think that it's possible to make any progress because I don't see the Greek Cypriots seeing the Turkish Cypriots as equals. It's a majority-minority situation in numbers. And as long as the Turkish Cypriots are seen as a minority and considered to be a minority, not equal with regard to certain rights, then there won't be any solution. We get close and close every time, and then it just fails. I don't want to blame anybody, but this is a reality. So that's why I don't think that we will be able to solve it. And again, there is no crisis in the island. Yes, there is no war. Maybe it's a soft kind of peace. Nobody is getting hurt. That's the most important thing. And so there is no urgency. When I say nobody really cares, what I meant is that the Europeans don't care about this issue. As long as it doesn't threaten the EU in any way, they don't mind. It's a minor issue for them. We have to accept that. It's a major issue for us, for Cyprus, for Greece, but not for the EU. As long as it's handled, as long as the Cyprus issue puts or keeps Turkey away from the EU, they like it. They prefer it. And so Cyprus is basically used as a scapegoat in that respect. So I don't think that the EU will put any pressure on Cyprus or Greece to resolve this issue. No, they're just making, the usual comments in their reports that this has to be resolved. But beyond that, nothing will happen. This is unfortunate truth. But it is, of course, very important to be resolved for Turkey. Unless this is resolved, we will not make any progress within the accession process or any other issue. So it's there. And if I can say to the commissioner, please give my best regards to Cornelius.
Well, I was about to say that I was going to disagree with the ambassador, but then he said that Cyprus is used as a scapegoat, and I couldn't agree with him more, in the sense that since he served in Brussels, he knows much better than we do that it was Greece for some time in the 90s that prevented this rapprochement or even the candidacy of Turkey to the EU. But then, when Greece in 1999 decided not to retain this role of the scapegoat within the European fora, it was proved in the hard way to Turkey as well that France, Germany, and other countries, Austria, didn't really want to see this process materialize. I mean, Turkey becoming a full member of the EU. So for Greece and for Cyprus, the ambassador knows again better than we do that a rapprochement, a comprehensive rapprochement between Turkey and the EU, based on some rules, of course, is an ideal scenario, both for the Greek Cypriots and for Greece. And we were working, we did work in that direction from 1999 until 2004, 2005. As the ambassador knows. Coming back to Cyprus, well, let me here stress that President Christodoulidis made a goodwill gesture or an offer, saying that Cyprus will not continue preventing or not letting some chapters discussed between Greece and between Turkey and the EU, not preventing these discussions regarding some chapters, but with one condition, that is that Turkey will return to the table of negotiations based on UN resolutions about a bizonal, bicommunal solution in the Cyprus issue. That is not happening. Mr. Tatar, the leader of the Turkish Cypriots, and of course, people from Ankara keep underlining that that is not the case anymore for them. So here we are in front of the perfect stalemate, irrespective of any attempts that are going to be upheld by the UN. Whether Cyprus affects Greek-Turkish relations, obviously, it's a thorn for us. But it seems that there is, for now, an agreement, including the Greek Cypriot leader and the president of Cyprus, of course, so Mr. Christodoulidis, and the two premiers, Mitsotakis and Erdogan, that for the time being, since Cyprus does not pose a danger to regional stability, and since things are not, of course, I agree with our Greek Cypriot friend, are not, there is no peace in Cyprus, but there is no danger that is posed to peace. And it seems that for some circles in the West, that is enough. Let us build or try to build some trust between Greece and Turkey without letting the issue of Cyprus damaging or affecting negatively our bilateral ties, given that Turkey, from 2013 up until 2019, has been violating Cyprus's exclusive economic zone and continental shelf by conducting seismic service, and not only seismic service, which is not the case anymore. I mean, there is a situation during the last 3 years of let's say, a smooth kind of smoothing of not relations between Turkey and Cyprus. There are no such relations between the Turkey and the Greek Cypriots, but there are no on the ground violations or provocations by the Turkish side. Whether problems can be solved between Greece and Turkey. Well, I think I was very strict during my opening remarks when saying that, implying that problems for now, they have both sides decided to put them on shelf or under the carpet, hide them under the carpet, which means that sooner or later they will, of course, arise, and then I will have to make some difficult choices. Whether we will sit on the table, start discussing about these issues, knowing that our differences are vast, there is no question about that, or after agreeing that we disagree, at least agree that we need to define the agenda, delimitate the agenda through which we can ask an international judicial body to resolve our differences. But we're talking on, as far as Greece is concerned, only about differences concerning sovereign rights and not about sovereignty, which means that, and I'm going to end with that, that Greece is not going to, and any government, I think, in the world, cannot expect an international judicial body to rule whether a Greek island is Greek or whether we should demilitarize our islands because Turkey claims that as long as they are not demilitarized, their sovereignty is under question. There is no question about that. Be sure that no Greek government can accept the ruling of any international judicial body on issues regarding sovereignty.
And that goes back to Galip, what you were saying in your opening remarks about how Greece and Turkey fundamentally have different projections of sovereignty. Do you have anything to add to this?
I think it's quite clear.
If you address the question to me, I didn't hear it.
No, it was just going back. I was reiterating your point, which Galip made earlier in the opening remarks. Galip.
No, I think it's exactly as you put it, and as both Konstantinos and Selim put it. It's not only Greece and Turkey disagree on certain subjects, but they also disagree on how to resolve them. Mm-hmm. So it's not only we disagree on this issue, but also we disagree on how to resolve it. Like, for instance, on Cyprus, the framework of solution between the two sides is completely different. And by each passing day, it's actually diverging more and more from each other. For Greece, this is, Greek Cyprus and Greece, this is a bizonal, bicommunal federal structure, more or less, is the solution framework. For Turkey, this is like more or less a two-state solution. The two-state solution has become the operational assumption in Ankara. So, given this difference between the framework within which to resolve these questions is also very much divergent from each other. I also don't see much prospect on Cyprus. I think right now the prospect that we can see both between the sides is they're unlikely to resolve the fundamental issues in bilateral relationship because it's essentially about their projection of sovereignty. It's politically risky and difficult to make compromises on this. And that's why I think the discussion should not be at bilateral level. And that's why the European level is so crucial, so that the bilateral Turkish, Greek, Cypriot, whatever discussion is also situated on a larger platform. And one point, again, at the Greek-Turkish level, is the Mediterranean Energy Forum. I don't think that Turkey will become a member of it anytime soon, but I think we can create a trilateral framework between the EU, East Mediterranean Energy Forum, and Turkey to discuss the issues in the EastMed, be it the security issue, migration issue, energy transition, all of them. So a structured trilateral framework at this stage might be the middle way before we can make any substantial progress on other files.
Perfect. Great, thank you very much. We'll come back to the room in a second. Selim, you just wanted to come back on Cyprus EU.
Yes, just one additional remark. I mean, the fact that we're not resolving the Cyprus issue or Turkey is not enthusiastic about it is because there is no incentive on the Turkish side. What do I mean by that? If the EU had said that, look, unless you resolve the Cyprus issue, you won't be members. But what we're hearing is that even if you resolve the Cyprus issue, you won't be members. This is the message that we're getting from a lot of the EU countries. What we're not hearing is, we'll give you a clear perspective for EU membership if you resolve this issue. That would be a major incentive for Turkey to resolve it. But no, it's the contrary. Even if you resolve it, you won't be members. And I think that's why there is no incentive for us to, rejoin the UN efforts or anything else. So what you're hearing so far is a lot of rhetoric, whether it's positive or negative, but no substantial development on the island. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay, I want to move on from the Cyprus issue because there's a range of other issues that are equally important. I'll come to you at the end of the table.
Hi, my name is Karim Elgendi, Associate Fellow here at Chatham House, focusing mostly on climate and energy. So on the Eastern Mediterranean Gas Forum, I think much is said about the exclusion of Turkey and the role of the Eastern Mediterranean Gas Forum in excluding Turkey from energy collaboration. But in fact, the gas forum is largely a talking shop. There has not been much movement on the ground when it comes to collaboration, except for strengthened collaboration between Israel and Egypt, which was already there going in the opposite direction. But other than that, 5 years later, the East Mediterranean Gas Forum has not really achieved that much. And that was partly because of this confusing mixed messaging that came out of the EU, which on the one hand said, this is a project for common interest, let's fund the research into it and see if we get the East Med pipeline all the way up to Europe and sell all this natural gas to the EU. But at the same time, it said we will be using 30% less gas by 2030 and 80% less gas by 2050. So if you invest today, we won't buy tomorrow. So do it at your own risk. And of course, the market spoke and said, we're not going to invest in this place. And all you ended up with is a little bit more gas going from Israel to Egypt, and increasingly so. And the other factor that happened is that Egypt itself, with growing demand, and its production was not producing as much as it was expected, so it ended up using most of that internally anyways. So at the same time, we have this other dynamic, which is decarbonization and moving away from natural gas within the region. So we've got some progress in Turkey, a lot more progress, but a smaller scale in Greece, and some slow progression as well on that front in Egypt. So my question is there a way in which we could envisage a reset, an energy collaboration, away from the exclusionary East Med Gas Forum, partly because it didn't really work, and also could the European Global Gateway, which has a significant focus on climate and energy projects, green energy projects, especially its interest in green hydrogen from this particular region, and former Vice President Timmermans said as much in his tour when he went to Egypt and Turkey and said, please make green hydrogen and we will buy it. Could it also become a catalyst for this kind of collaboration?
Thank you very much. My list of people who want to come in is growing, so I will ask you to keep it short. Over to you.
Yeah, just a couple issues, Europe and Russia. And first, Russia, this relationship between Turkey and Russia characterized as the personal...
Sorry, can you introduce yourself?
Thaw from Ankara Institute, Thaw's son, between Putin and Erdogan. Yeah, on cameras, you can get such a picture as expected. Both of them are in power last 2 decades, more than 2 decades. And it is inevitable, you'll get that picture. But as Ambassador said, in all fronts, including also energy, the Turkish and Russian envisioning of the region and the geopolitical priorities are opposite. So this cannot be explained along with the personal relationship. That personal relationship is actually managing those differences. And we're the only NATO country which shut down Russian plane. They killed our soldiers, we fight back, etc. So there are some existential issues, and these things and these differences needs to be managed. And rather than characterizing that relationship solely with the personal relation, we should be putting the context very different visions are actually competing each other, and that needs to be managed. And that relationship functions that way. To Europe, the existential question is what kind of, in economy, geopolitics, and security, what kind of future Europe is envisioning for coming decades? and specifically what kind of security and geopolitical future Europe is envisioning in the southeastern Europe vis-a-vis the threats and the risks. If Europe could have any kind of serious answer to those questions, regardless of even Turkey do not want to come near to Europe, they will need to work with Turkey, if possible, partner, and even if more possible, to be part of the European security and the geopolitical matrix. So that's the main question, and it's not emerging within the Europe, and looks like it's going to get quite difficult also in the coming years. Just last two sentences, and the main reason for the difficulty for the future, regardless of Trump or Biden, by the way, I mean, for Europe, the biggest troubles happened under the Biden administration with subsidy programs and etc. Trump may talked a lot, the rhetoric was high about the trade wars, but Biden executed very successfully, by the way. So there isn't much difference. So when those things is getting out of control, and it was the first time during the Biden administration, European trade bodies started to talk about first Europe policy. It's something you could remember from Trump. So these threats will emerge. And at that point, I mean, Europe needs to make a decision. And Turkey will be ready in any scenario to partner with the Europe because the direction is that way and all kinds of dynamics structurally working that way. And it could be a, let's say, positive agenda. And let me stop here.
Thank you very much. Natalie.
Thank you. Natalie Sabanadze. I'm a senior research fellow here at Russia and Eurasia program. I have one question to Selim. Happy to see him. We were in Brussels together. And I agree with him because relationship between Turkey and the European Union very important in the context of Russia's war on Ukraine, of course. And one area he'll be very familiar with was visa liberalization, something that could incentivize warming up relations between Turkey and the EU. And I'm curious where we are on this file and if there are other incentives that can be used of this type, perhaps within customs union. And I had also one brief question for Galip, if you could elaborate a bit more on the connection between Black Sea and Eastern Mediterranean. What are the factors that make it one geopolitical space as you referred to?
Great, thank you very much. We'll pause there and come back to our speakers, and then if we have time, I'll try to squeeze in one final round, but we are starting to come to time. So we'll also ask the speakers to be relatively brief in replying to these questions. Quite a wide range, energy, Russia, Europe. Galip, should I start with you, perhaps?
Sure. I think there's few questions, but I mean, Kerim, yes, I agree with you. I think the Eastern Mediterranean Energy Forum lacks content, and that's correct. And I think the idea of the energy pipeline project was stillborn from the start. If I'm not mistaken, the projected cost was 6.2 billion euro at a time when the Europe is talking about the energy transition, reduction of the dependency on such kind of the energy. That was not like, market was very feasible. So both of them I agree. But it is still such realignments or the idea of such club is important for the region. And bearing in mind that EU is part of it, US is part of it, in one way or another, it's still important symbolically which country is part of it and which country is not part of it. And I think it's very much from this perspective in Ankara as well. The Russia dimension, I think single space in the sense what it means for the Russian-Western confrontation. Because the Russia, from Russian perspective, probably the East Med or the Mediterranean is one area of the soft belly of Europe, because Russia has strong foothold in two conflict zones that has direct impact on the European security, but also European domestic politics. Take migration, which is one of the major domestic political issue in Europe and one of the major contributor to the rise of the far right, with implication on the European wider European political picture. And in Syria and in Libya, Russia in itself is a major factor for the millions of migrants coming to Europe. because by bombing of Aleppo, which was like one of the major center of migration. So, for example, Russia still has the ability of driving many more migration towards Europe. So by being present in the conflict zone is important. Russia can potentially have an impact, like for instance, Libya, I always say Libya is a Gulf country located in Mediterranean. One reason that at the time when the Europe was looking for alternative energies to reduce dependency on Russia, one reason that Libya didn't feature as much in the conversation in Europe as it should have was related to the presence of Russia on the ground. I mean, the Russian military presence is not that far away from the NATO's command center in Italy. I think it's in Palermo. Or where is it? I mean, Napoli. Sorry, Napoli. So from all these different angles, and finally, the type of relationship that Russia engages in the southern neighborhood has an impact on the Western security, like the type of relationship it engages with countries like Turkey, with other regional actors. Let's not forget, almost all the regional actors has adopted quite neutral position on Ukraine. And I think one reason for this was the presence of Russia. The presence of Russia in the Middle East was one of the major factors that incentivized many regional countries to more or less adopt a neutral position and very much also facilitating, for many of the rich Russians to be, to be present in these countries was because Russia is present on the ground. So I think if you look at from these different interconnections, in terms of the influence or the impact on the European security, this is, I would say, like quite an integrated space. And also Russia has military presence in these areas, which passes through the Dardanelles and Istanbul Straits to Black Sea.
Thank you, Caleb. Konstantinos?
Yep. Regarding energy, I agree with the comments. I think that the future is renewables, number one. Number two, if countries in the region don't join forces, they won't be competitive as far as the international market is concerned. I agree that the message that was sent by the EU, especially in a memorandum that was signed in July 2022 between the EU and Egypt and Israel, was not very clear. We want to cooperate with you up until 2030, and then we don't need your gas. I think that the Europeans will need Eastern Mediterranean gas even after 2030, even in this green transition period that we are already living. But again, as I said, renewables is the future. When it comes to natural gas, it seems to me that Turkey is the elephant in the room, together with Egypt, as a big market, a big and thirsty market that is still dependent on natural gas from Iran and Russia, and to a lesser extent Azerbaijan. So it is in need of natural gas, and it will be an ideal market for Eastern Mediterranean countries, provided that, of course, things are settled and that it can be included. And then it's up to regional players to decide whether the European or the Asian market is more profitable for them. But unless they join forces, they cannot make any difference, and they cannot be competitive on the global market. My other point is regarding Turkey and Russia. And, I'm always surprised to see Turkish friends downplaying the importance of this relationship. For me, it's not a personal relationship anymore. It is something more than that. For instance, trade skyrocketed from less than $30 billion to $65 billion only within a year, because Turkey is not engaged, is not involved on the sanctions that have been imposed on Russia. And of course, it has become a place where Russians can do business, or through which Turkey Europeans can do business with Russia. Number two, it seems to me that the two sides, despite the differences, and there are many, have reached a level of a strategic understanding, as I call it, in the sense that they do not let their disagreements on other fronts negatively affect their relations, be it the Caucasus, be it Ukraine, be it Libya, be it Syria. This is at least my understanding. And of course, I can understand why some circles in Turkey want to downplay the importance of this relationship, but I think that it is developing in a strategic relationship rather than in a relationship that has to do only with the personalities. That's it for me for now.
Thank you very much. Finally, Salim.
Yes, 3 points. I'd like to start with the last issue mentioned by Konstantinos about Turkey-Russia. A few comments on that. Yes, Turkey and Russia have increased their trade or commercial relations exponentially in recent years because Turkey is not applying the sanctions. And why is it not applying the sanctions? Because of the personal relationship. It all started because of the personal relationship. It has grown into something more substantial, definitely. But last year, if we had a different result of the presidential elections, I wonder if this would have continued. That's an open question. Secondly, on energy issues, the exclusion of Turkey from the energy forum in the East Med has made it, let's say, not functional. So bring Turkey in. You might say that it's difficult because Cyprus is a member, but Cyprus and Turkey are also members in the Euromed forum, the Barcelona forum, whatever you call it. So there are ways in which those two countries can work together and be in the same, let's say, international organization or entity. So that's possible. And then the forum could be more, let's say, work in a concrete manner. Thirdly, the more substantial question was with regard to visa liberalization. Unfortunately, the ball is in Turkey's court. You might remember that on the migration deal, one of the issues was to resolve visa problems between Turkey and the EU, to remove all visas from Turkish citizens. And that was one of my pet projects. There were 72 benchmarks that Turkey had to fulfill, and 6 remained in 2016, and 6 still remain to this day, unfortunately, because Turkey has not fulfilled the remaining 6 benchmarks. Turkey sometimes mentions that the visa facilitation or visa easing should start, but without complying with the necessary conditions, and this is not the case. And the mood has changed. 8 years ago now. It's been 8 years. Imagine that. If Turkey had fulfilled the remaining 6 conditions, the mood was much different. The European Parliament's position was much different, and we could have had it. But now everything is different. Everything has changed. So I don't think that visa facilitation or anything related to easing visa issues for Turkish citizens will happen. In fact, it's probably the reverse, because now we're having many Turks applying for, let's say, asylum. Imagine that. So I don't think that the EU would anytime soon give any visa liberalization or facilitation to Turks. Thank you.
So stick to 30 seconds and I will cut you off at the end of the
I have a comment. I mean,
sorry, please introduce yourself.
Like you said, Turkish National Intelligence Academy. So I think one of the reasons, and despite all differences between Turkey and Russia find some modus operandi. And I think if you look at the Turkish EU ground, we see security, energy, migration, trade, disaster, lots of joint opportunities to cooperate. But I think you can find lots of reasons not to cooperate. But I think that is a geopolitical lack of vision from the European side as well. I think this relationship needs to be initiated to a certain extent. Otherwise, you can always...
Sorry, where's your question?
This is a comment.
Okay.
This is another... is Europe trying to find, a vision to, despite all these shared opportunities, I think the cooperation is not working. And Europeans often criticize Turkey to cooperate with Russia. We see that Sarkozy and Merkel played a role in stopping Turkey's EU accession. And we see another cycle of far right. So can we see another positive mood from the European side, and we will have European Parliament elections. So how will it affect Turkish-EU relations under these circumstances?
Great, thank you very much.
Very quick question about the possible political security risk between Turkey and Greece. So Greece has purchased F-35s and Rafale jets, and Turkey was kicked out from the F-35 jet program because of its purchase of the Russian missiles. So my question is, the security balance in the region also is tilted in favor of Greece. My question is, if Turkey will not succeed with its own national jet Khan, which is more likely not to succeed in next 5-10 years, would Turkey go more in line with Russia or China? Would there be any more obstacles between Turkey and EU relations?
Thank you. And you are?
My name is Emre, research fellow at Foreign Policy Center.
Thank you very much. At the back.
Thank you so much. Very quick comment following the question. I think we need to compare that before 2017, Turkey hasn't got a power in the Eastern Mediterranean because Turkey couldn't find any drilling ship or seismic ship. But in 2017, Turkey purchased 4 drilling ships and 2 seismic ships, and this is the bigger power in the Eastern Mediterranean. Even today, Turkey is drilling a ship, drilling in the like a conflict zone of the Greece and the Turkey. But Greece didn't raise voice because Turkey make it because it has muscle. Just I'm finishing it because it has own ship. I think it's the biggest policy change of the Turkey in the Eastern Mediterranean, which is mentioned. As I understand, Greece didn't raise any concern or his voice. Shall Greece accept this as the status quo, and will we postpone this crisis until Turkey find an explanation?
Great, thank you. And very briefly,
Dominic Chilcott. I used to be a British diplomat. I want to ask about
nice and big.
I'd ask about Article 5 and NATO. I mean, Donald Trump has thrown some doubt over whether the United States, under his presidency, would observe Article 5. What's the attitude in Ankara of Article 5? Do they feel NATO would come to the rescue if it was needed, or are they going to do anything themselves in the event of a Trump presidency to reinforce the collective commitment to collective security in NATO?
Perfect. Thank you very much. We'll shake things up this time. Start with Konstantinos, then go to Selim, and then end with Galip. If you could all please keep it relatively brief, but yes, round.
Okay, I will answer only the question that was indirectly addressed to me, and I need to clarify the following. In 2020, Turkey conducted for 82 days seismic service, not drillings, seismic service in disputed area, which we consider to be our to belong to our maritime zones, exclusive economic zone and continental shelf, and even territorial waters, because Turkey was conducting this seismic service 6.1 nautical miles southern of Castellorizo. Greece, of course, reacted, and it did not remain silent, as was said. But again, we're not talking about drilling ships, and of course, we are not in any case talking about Greece silently recognizing Turkey's sovereign rights in this part, especially 6.1 nautical miles from Castellorizo. There is no question about that. That is potential Greek territorial waters, not even continental shelf. And I'm making this distinction because, as you probably know, continental shelf and exclusive economic zone is where a country has sovereign rights, whereas in territorial waters you have sovereignty. Last but not least, I just saw that the Prime Minister Mitsotakis called President Erdogan to wish him for his birthday shortly after President Putin had called him. So I only wish, based on the comment made by Ambassador, that this personal relationship will turn into something more substantial on a bilateral level and much more sustainable, I would like to add. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Selim?
Yes, thank you very much. And absolutely, personal relationships are important, but they're tricky. So we do hope that they will be sustainable. And I'm sure that there was some mutual, let's say, benefits that Putin and Erdogan are so much together. Now, with regard to NATO, Whether Turkey would go the way of Russia and China, definitely not. Turkey remembered that it's a NATO member recently, fortunately, and how important it is for Turkey. Now, with regard to Dominic's question, which I'm very happy to see, even if it's very far away from here, Article 5, that's a very crucial question. And of course, that will be coming up as an important matter if Trump is elected. But it is not a matter that is being discussed in Turkey so much. It's a given. That's how it's being seen. If there's an attack on Turkey or any other NATO member, that Article 5 is applied. So that's the basic thinking that continues so far. With regard to Greece purchasing the F-35s and Turkey being out of it, as long as the rapprochement between Turkey and Greece continues, I don't think that it's going to be as important with regard to who gets what. As long as we remember that we are both NATO members, that we are both actually allies, neighbors, and if we can diminish the tension and through dialogue, I don't think that this will be a major issue. Let's hope that this Persian relationship that Mitsotakis and the president have will continue and endure. Thank you.
Thank you. It's somewhat reassuring somewhere, I think, that at least one NATO country believes Article 5 will continue to follow. Certainly us in Europe, we don't feel that way at all at the moment. Galip, final word.
Like to take from the NATO questions, I think despite all the crises that we're experiencing in Turkey, NATO, or Turkey-US relationship, in its core, the NATO is one of the pillars of Turkish foreign and security policy, and also bring a lot on the table. And even in some of the conflict zones that we don't discuss about this much, but Turkey being a NATO member is one of the still major factors when it comes to Russian calculations towards Turkey and its neighborhoods. Secondly, the question about the fighter jets. Right now, as we are seeing, there's a positive momentum in Turkey-US. The F-16 question has been largely resolved. And Turkey is still in search of finding other fighter jets. The most discussed option is the Eurofighter, which UK, Spain, Italy, and Germany is co-producing. And as far as we know, that of all these countries, Germany is the one that is currently blocking and citing different human rights consideration. And particularly after the recent Germany signaling that it's going to sell it will be happy to sell it to Saudi Arabia. Obviously, the human rights consideration will be quite an interesting one to observe, that that it's okay to sell it to Saudi Arabia and not to Turkey. So therefore, I think the first option still seems to remain to finding alternatives from the Western camp. So therefore, it's still from a NATO framework, and a discussion about a new batch of the S-400 or the fighter jets from Russia doesn't seem to be much discussion on this. But if the Western options, all of them fails, I think that might once again pops up again. But at this stage, I don't see this to be one of the final point on Turkey-Russia. I think in Turkey-Russia, this is a valid question. To what extent is an Turkey-Russia relationship? To what extent this is like an Erdogan-Putin relationship? And at this stage, does it matter? Because given that these two actors has been in power for more than 20 years, so analytically speaking, for the time being, I think this question doesn't mean much. But when we project the future of the relationship, then this question it becomes even much more important. But I think we have to make one small distinction. The Turkish-Russian engagement in Middle East and North Africa is qualitatively different than Turkish-Russian engagement in post-Soviet space. I know this term is not a very nice one to use, but like South Caucasus or Central Asia. Because in Syria, in Libya, the Turkish-Russian engagement came at the expense of the Western influence. But in post-Soviet space or in South Caucasus or Central Asia, the increase in Turkish foothold will come at the expense of Russia. And that's why you see that Russia were not really very forthcoming whenever it came to any structural engagement in South Caucasus and Central Asia. And at a time when the idea of Turkic world is gaining more currency in Ankara, the Turkic world Russia regards as its backyard, the Central Asia, etc. I personally think that this will put more pressure on the relationship the more that Turkey is trying to increase its foothold in these areas.
Thank you very much, Khaled. Great. We've had a quite wide range of discussions, lots of talks about trust building and the need for more trust building, lots of discussion around Cyprus, including a fair amount of healthy disagreement, as well as discussions around the inclusion and exclusion around energy cooperation, and the big missing piece here is the role of the EU. Thank you very much to our speakers. Thank you to our participants in the room. Thank you to our participants online. Please join me in a round of applause.
Thank you.